The air in the Grand Assembly Hall tasted like recycled nitrogen and judgment. It was that specific kind of heavy silence you only get when a few hundred diplomats are holding their breath, waiting for a train wreck. Elias Thorne stood near the center of the obsidian floor, fiddling with the cuff of his dress shirt. He wasn't nervous about the politics. He was nervous because the Drexian High Council was looking at him with the sort of predatory amusement usually reserved for a cat toying with a particularly slow mouse. High Counselor Zal cleared his throat, a sound like grinding stones. "And for the human representative to cement our union," Zal announced, his voice dripping with mock solemnity, "we present Vexia Kale." A ripple of low, chittering laughter moved through the Drexian delegation. The heavy blast doors groaned open, and she stepped through. Vexia was a lot. She was towering, encased in ceremonial armor that looked like it had been salvaged from a scrap heap and hammered back together with sheer will. One of her cranial ridges was sheared off, and a jagged silvery line ran from her jaw down to her collarbone. To the Drexians, these were marks of failure. The galaxy called her a monster. He remembered her as the savior who watched over him in the dark. Or at least, he remembered the type. The kind of person who stood between the soft things and the sharp things. Reputation is often a construct of prejudice rather than a reflection of character, Elias thought, watching the way the other Drexians recoiled as she passed. She didn't walk. She marched, her movements stiff, expecting a blow or rejection. She stopped in front of him. The heat radiating off her bio-armor was palpable, smelling faintly of ozone and old copper. Her secondary heart was beating so hard he could see the vibration against her chest plating. She looked down at him, her eyes narrowed, waiting for the human to run away or demand a refund. Elias didn't run. He just tilted his head. Looking at her, he didn't see the brute they wanted him to see. He saw someone who was holding herself so tightly she was about to snap. There was a loose buckle on her gauntlet. It was a tiny thing, rattling against the metal every time she shifted. It was driving him crazy. Without thinking, pure, stupid human gut feeling, Elias reached out. Vexia flinched. It was a micro-movement, a shifting of weight to her back foot, her claws twitching. And true loyalty often looks like aggression to those who have never been protected. And for a second, the guards tensed, thinking she was about to gut him. But Elias didn't pull a weapon. He just caught the loose strap on her gauntlet and tugged it secure. "You've got a loose latch here," he said, his voice dropping under the ambient hum of the ventilation. "It's going to chafe if you leave it like that." The silence in the hall shifted. It went from mocking to confused. Vexia stared at his hand. It was soft, pale, and ridiculously fragile against her obsidian scales. Her dermal plates flushed a deep, confused violet. She didn't know what to do with the smallness of the gesture. Humans are weird like that. They don't look at the grand design. They look at the loose thread. A diplomatic insult turns into a political power play when a human embraces the warrior everyone fears. "Is this acceptable?" Zal asked, the smirk faltering on his mandibles. Elias looked up, meeting Vexia's bewildered gaze. He smiled, and it wasn't the baring of teeth the Drexians use for dominance. It was just warm. "She bears the scars of honor that her people mistake for shame," Elias said, mostly to himself, but loud enough for the front row to hear. He turned to the High Council, keeping his position right next to the outcast, creating a visual tether that defied the room's logic. "I think we'll get along just fine," Elias said. The reception that followed was less of a celebration and more of a suffocating exercise in etiquette. The air recycled through the vents was too cold. Or maybe it was just the way the Drexian High Council watched them, like scientists waiting for a volatile chemical reaction. Vexia stood just behind Elias's left shoulder, a looming shadow of jagged edges and nervous energy. She hadn't retracted her claws. Elias held a crystal flute of something blue and bubbling, swirling it but not drinking. He could feel the heat radiating off Vexia, a steady, furnace-like presence that made the hair on his arm stand up. It wasn't fear. It was grounding. "You're humming," she murmured, the sound vibrating low in her throat, barely audible over the drone of conversation. "Am I?" Elias asked, glancing back. "I do that when I'm thinking, or when I'm trying not to scream at dignitaries." Vexia didn't laugh. Her sensory pits flared, the ridges along her neck snapping open. "Don't drink that," she said. It wasn't a request. Before Elias could ask why, the server, a slender, nervous Drexian from a lower caste, stepped too close. It happened in the space between heartbeats. The air pressure in the room seemed to drop as Vexia moved. It wasn't the clumsy, lumbering violence the council expected from a monster. It was fluid, terrifyingly efficient, and silent. One moment Elias was holding a glass. The next, the crystal was shattered on the floor, and Vexia had the server pinned against the banquet table. Her forearm was locked against the server's throat, just enough to immobilize, not to crush. A hidden syringe skittered across the polished stone. The room exploded into chaos. Guards shouted, weapons charged with a high-pitched whine, and High Counselor Zal pointed a trembling finger. "Control your beast, human," Zal bellowed, his composure cracking. "She attacks our own staff unprovoked," Vexia snarled, a guttural sound that dropped the room's temperature. But she didn't look at the guards. She looked at Elias. Her eyes were wide, the pupils blown into frantic, vertical slits. She was waiting for him to recoil. She was waiting for the rejection. Elias walked over to her. He didn't look at the assassin gasping for air. He looked at the puddle of blue liquid sizzling where it touched the floor tiles. Neurotoxin. Subtlety wasn't really their strong suit. He stepped into Vexia's personal space, ignoring the razor-sharp spines on her elbows. He placed a hand gently on her bicep. "It's okay," he said softly. "You can let him go now. The point has been made." Vexia shuddered, the adrenaline crash hitting her all at once. She released the server, who scrambled away. Coughing, she stepped back, making herself small, expecting the reprimand. "This creates a diplomatic incident of the highest order," Zal hissed, stepping forward. "She is unstable. She is a liability." Elias turned, placing himself physically between the council and Vexia. He adjusted his cuffs, his voice deadly calm. "She isn't unstable. She smelled the toxin you tried to slip me. You call it aggression because it scares you. I call it doing the job you were too cowardly to do yourself." He looked at Vexia, who was watching him with a mixture of confusion and something that looked painfully like hope. "Shared history creates a stronger foundation than political convenience," Elias said, addressing the room but speaking only to her. "You gave me a treaty on paper. She just gave me her allegiance in blood and bone. I know which one I trust." He reached out again, this time taking her clawed hand in his. It was heavy, cool to the touch, and lethal. It was the safest thing in the room. "Let's go, Vexia," Elias said, tugging gently. "I think we're done here." As they walked out, leaving the stunned silence of the galaxy's most powerful leaders in their wake, Vexia squeezed his hand back. It was awkward, a little too tight and completely perfect.